So Vince, let's dive into the run game.
Yes, the run game, and this is really where the rubber meets the road because, watching that Penn State game back, Wisconsin controlled that game on the ground. I mean, they did work on the ground. Chaz Malusi obviously had a good game, but it was the hosses up front. They were moving that Penn State front around. Now, of course, Penn State made some plays and things of that nature, but that run game scares the you-know-what out of me just because they're so good. They're so good at moving the football, on the ground. This is going to be a challenge for Notre Dame. I have a lot of faith in Notre Dame's defense. I really, really do. But they're almost going to have to sell out in the run game to shut them down, and then they're going to have to make plays in the pass game. So we're focusing on the run game, but I feel like they're going to have to try to confuse Wisconsin a little bit with some stunts and some pressures and some things like that. But this is the number one focus. If I'm Marcus Freeman going into this game, you have to at least neutralize this run attack from Wisconsin.
See, I think Penn State did that, though. I guess that's where I disagree with you a little bit is Wisconsin got their yards against Penn State. They rushed for 180 yards. Chase Malusi went for over 100. But he only averaged 3.9 yards per carry, and as a team, Wisconsin only averaged 3.1 yards per carry. And again, it's a little more than that because they had some sacks. And I still will say every chance I get that it is stupid that they count sacks as rushing yards.
Agreed.
But I don't think they were necessarily as dominant as they normally are. I think Penn State's rush defense is solid, but I thought Penn State did a better job against Wisconsin, for example, than they did Auburn in that game. I mean, Auburn rushed for only 2 more yards, but Auburn was 4.5 yards per carry, 4.55, whereas Wisconsin was 3.1. And it is because they are such a sort of ground and pound offense that I think they were able to move some guys around, but Penn State was also able to use their speed to not limit some of the big runs. They had that one big long run that Ches had early. It was like about a 20 or so yard run. Other than that, it was a lot of ground and pound stuff. Now, I will say that Wisconsin did move the ball relatively well.
Yep.
Got into the red zone. What was it? Trying to look at here. They got into the red zone 4 times against Penn State. Now, twice were late in the game when it was kind of coming from behind and they had to throw it a little bit more, and only scored once in those situations. So I wasn't quite as impressed with the Wisconsin ground attack. Now, I watched them against Eastern Michigan, and they just bullied Eastern Michigan, but Eastern Michigan's not that good.
And I didn't even watch that game because I wanted to watch them against, a Division I.
Right.
You know what I mean? Against a Power 5 team.
Yeah, I mean, just for context, Eastern Michigan gave up 206 rushing yards and 6.1 yards per carry to UMass this past weekend in a win. UMass is not good. So, I really, UMass went for 121 against BC and ran for 42 yards against Pitt. And they went for 206 on Eastern Michigan. So this is the strength of the Wisconsin team. I'm still not necessarily sold on this being a 2 years ago version of Wisconsin offense. I think they're big and physical. That is the one thing I'll say. When I look at their offensive line, actually one of their least experienced guys is a guy that I like more than most. It's Joe Tittman, the center. I think he's been really good. He's not your typical center size either. He's like 6'6", well over 300 pounds, but he moves pretty well. I think Jack Nelson's a pretty good player at right guard. I don't love their tackles, to be completely honest with you. I think Logan Bruss is more of a guard that's playing tackle out of necessity. I think Tyler Veach is a guy that's probably more of a guard, in my opinion. And so the matchup here, to me, that's going to be very interesting, Vince, is it's going to be how does Notre Dame utilize their speed against Wisconsin's beef?
Absolutely.
That's the question.
Because Notre Dame doesn't have the beef up front like Wisconsin does. So, I mean, there's no way they can match up head-to-head from a beef standpoint. So they're going to have to do other things. I mean, they're going to have to, get on the outside. They're going to have to move. They're going to have to stunt. They're going to have to use their speed and athleticism, which they have in spades. I mean, I have full confidence that they're going to be able to do that. You're giving me more confidence. Shame on you for, against this run game. You're making me more confident, man. That's what happens when I listen to you.
I thought we were negative all the time. That's what I was told. We're negative Nancy's.
Well, only when we're talking about the offensive line.
Only when you hear what you want to hear.
Yeah,
basically.
well, that's fair too. But I really like the matchup of Notre Dame's speed versus Wisconsin's beef. I would take speed over beef all day long.
Yeah, it just depends on how you use it, I think, right?
Right,
Then it comes down into preparation and game planning. How does Marcus Freeman utilize it? Look, I guarantee you we're going to see a defense that does not look anything like what we saw the first 3 weeks, just from an alignment standpoint. I think we're going to see them doing a lot of different things because this is a completely different defense. And my thought of that comes from what we saw last year.
Yeah.
Marcus Freeman would against teams like Tulsa ran the ball a little bit more than other teams in the AC, and they did a lot more 4-down looks in that game. Georgia, every time Georgia was in a 2 tight end alignment in the bowl game last year, was it the Sugar Bowl? Every time Georgia went with 12 personnel, Cincinnati would put in their 4-3 legitimate 4-3 personnel, like 3 legitimate big linebackers, and they would play big boy football, and they were in a 4-down almost exclusively in that game, especially on early downs. And so Marcus Freeman has shown the willingness to say, hey, look, you don't play like anybody else we play, so we're not going to line up and play you like we play everybody else.
Right.
I think he's a smart enough guy to do that because he's done that already.
Yeah, and we saw in the first few games who were primarily pass offenses, he would almost go 4 levels, right? He had a front, he had the linebackers, and he had some guys kind of right behind the linebackers.
Yeah, including some linebackers.
There, right? Exactly. I don't see that being the case on Saturday. I really don't. He's going to get some guys a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage.
Right. So how do you use this? Okay, so what do? You say, okay, we're going to shoot gaps, we're going to penetrate and those kind of things, and that sounds great, and that'll be a part of what you do. But the other part of that is, I think you have to be careful that you don't get too aggressive, because if you're just shooting gaps, all Wisconsin's going to do is they're just going to wash you down and create run lanes. So you've got to be creative. You can't just slant all day, because if you're just slanting all day, they're going to catch you in enough slants in the direction they want you to go that they're going to beat you. I think part of it too is you need to be able to take on blocks and then win. So like Jason Adamiola is not just going to be shooting around guys all the time. I think there's plenty of times where we're going to see him come out and we're going to see him shock and disengage, and we're going to have to see that. And Kurt Heinz, just if he plays this weekend, it's going to have to be a big part of it. You're going to need to see Howard Cross be able to hold up at the point of attack. I'm really curious if we're going to see different personnel more. Are we going to see a little more of Jacob Lacey? Are we going to see maybe some Gabriel Rubio or Aiden Keanaaina? I don't know the answer to those questions, but I'm curious to see if we do that. And then, then the other thought is, okay, so I think there's some merit, however, to still using your 3-down against this team. And when I say that, Vince, is because I think there's merit to being able to play 3-down with Isaiah Foskey moving around, which everybody hates, but then crashing him inside, blowing up those guards, getting him ahead of steam, smashing into those guards. Because here's the big key to the run game. You have to you cannot allow the running backs to get through the first level. If they get through the first level, that is where they're dangerous. Okay. The key for the Notre Dame defensive line and linebackers is to get a push or penetration and force them to declare early. Because this is the great thing about Notre Dame speed. Once they declare where the ball's going, whether it's a bounce or a cutback or whatever, then the speed just flies to the football. And so, to me, this is a game where I want to see Isaiah Foskey moving around. I want to see Jordan Pataho moving around. I want to see Justin Adamiola moving around and letting them get a 3-step head start and just smash those guards right in the face.
I like that idea. I think Isaiah Foskey needs to do better with his timing. There are too many times he's just late.
Well, but see, I think part of that is he's not being asked to crash. What I'm saying is, like, he is on a stunt. Like, it's not a read and react. Hey, Isaiah, you're lining up here in the B gap, and you are running right at the inside hip of that guard or the outside hip of that guard, and you are blasting him. And because if you can get the guard, and this is the big key for Wisconsin, this is the biggest key for the Notre Dame defensive line. If you can get a push against the guards or penetration against the guards, that is where you're going to have success against them, in my opinion. I think Notre Dame can win the edge. I'm confident that with Myron Tungavaloa and Isaiah Foskey, I think they're going to have success on the edge. I think they've been when their technique is right. They're big, they're physical. Myron's 265, Isaiah's 255, 260. It's up the middle that is my concern. And if they can win up the middle, then they will. That's how you beat this Wisconsin offense. Is you got to beat them up the middle. And I just think that is one way, not the only way. Wouldn't be my primary defensive look. It is just one way that I think that you can see that get more of a push, right? And to win in the middle is to, again, if you're a big physical 315-pound guard, and I don't care how big and strong you are, if Isaiah Foskey or Jordan Patelho or Justin Adamiola is able to get a 4 or 5 step head start into hitting you, they're going to knock you back. And we've already seen that. That's the key.
Yeah, you cannot allow the line of scrimmage to move in Wisconsin's direction. You can't. Because then the running back, he's good enough, Chaz Malusi's good enough to follow those guys and then make a cut and go.
Right.
And you can't be on skates. You have to stand up at the point of attack. I completely agree with that because, look, if you can stand him up at the line of scrimmage, then the cavalry will come. Mm-hmm. As you mentioned, with the speed that Notre Dame kind of attacks the football, you have to stack them up at the line of scrimmage.
Right.
You can't allow movement on a consistent basis. Look, it's going to happen at times. They may catch Notre Dame in a stun or whatever, but it can't happen on a consistent basis. It just cannot.
So how do they figure that out? How do they do that? And I don't think you can just line up and play 4-3. I mean, people are saying, oh, you're going to play 4-3 defense. You can't just line up and do that all the time. You're going to have to see different personnel. You're going to have to see different alignments. You're going to have to see movement. You're going to have to see the 3 downs at times and just crash them and try to keep Wisconsin guessing. If you just try to line up and say, hey, we're going to go 4-4 against Wisconsin, they're going to eat you up, because their play action game will get to you, which we'll talk about. But more so is like they're going to put bodies in there. They're just going to throw, because that's the thing. They're going to go 2 tight end, 3 tight end.
Sure.
You know, they're going to have, they're just going to try to just move you. And with the goal of what their offense is, Vince, is they're trying to create as many gaps as possible for their backs to find holes through.
Sure.
And that's one of the things that all the big personnel groups do to you. This is a lot like what Stanford used to do to Notre Dame, right? And so how can you have success slowing that down?
What Notre Dame liked to do last year. I mean, let's be honest. Right. So I mean, it's not going to be anything that Notre Dame hasn't seen before, which I think is good. I think that benefits Notre Dame. I mean, they went up against it in practice, right? And now Marcus Freeman wasn't there. I get that, but the personnel did, and so it's not. But he's seen it,
like you said. I mean, the last game he coached at Cincinnati was Georgia. Similar type of offense. And with all due respect to Chez Malusi, he's their 5th string running back at Georgia. Maybe.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Maybe. Yeah. You know what I mean? So
no. I completely.
And they held Georgia in the 40 yards rushing. Now this Wisconsin line is more experienced, Vince, than that Georgia line was, because they had some injuries. But it's a similar philosophy, similar schemes, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, look, if Marcus Freeman can do to Wisconsin what he did to Georgia, this isn't even going to be a ball game.
No, because they can't beat. No, you're right, because they can't throw the ball on Notre Dame like Georgia threw the ball on Cincinnati. Here's one final piece of this, Vince. The play of the linebackers is going to be so important in this game.
Yep.
My concern is that at times the linebackers have been catchy, right? Like let the second level guys get to you. When they see offensive linemen pulling, the edge players and the linebackers need to see that and crash it hard. If you let those guards get up into the hole, it's not going to work out for you. You know, if I'm Drew White and I'm flowing and I see that guard coming, I'm hitting that gap and I'm blowing him the heck up. Same thing for the end players. If the puller or the kick out guy is your responsibility, don't wait on him.
Yeah, don't allow him to come to you. Yeah, because he's already going to have speed coming at you.
Right.
And if you're still and this guy's coming at you, you're going to lose. Right.
And if you stay, it widens the gap.
Yes,
right, to
absolutely.
run through. If you crash it,
Yep.
not only does the momentum impact events, but you've now narrowed that hole, or you force them to bounce. And if if the Wisconsin running backs are forced to bounce, that's where you're okay. Now Kyle
Absolutely.
Hamilton is a factor. Houston Griffith, Cam Hart, Isaiah Pryor, Jack Kaiser. Those guys become a bigger factor.
Yeah.
I'm concerned about that cutback. I'm concerned about that vertical insertion into the line off of a counter or a power play. And Notre Dame and Wisconsin gets a body on a body. And once you get through that first wave of defenders, there's nobody there. That's my concern. So Notre Dame has to be super aggressive, but that's also, to me, using your speed to your advantage.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be this is the key. The Notre Dame linebackers and edge players have to make a living in this game beating Wisconsin's blockers to the point of attack. If they want to get to this kick out spot, then you need to beat them there.
Yeah.
If they want to pull into the hole, you need to beat them there. Because, hey, you may block me, but if you and I are engaging in the hole, that means there's no more hole.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's going to be a key. It's going to have to be Drew White and J.D. Birch. J.D.'s been doing it, Vince.
Yes.
But this is a game where Drew White has to just be
and he's done it at times, but not consistently for an entire game. And so this needs to be a consistent game for him. And they just can't – you can't play passive linebacker against this kind of an offense. You just can't, because you're going to get pushed back, because like you said, Wisconsin does a great job of getting to the second level. And once they get on you, it's game over. You can't allow them to get on you.
This is what also we need to see in this game.
7, 12,
nope,
14,
5-2.
Oh,
5-2.
yeah, sure.
This has got to be a Bo Bauer game.
Yeah,
Bo Bauer's got to make an impact in this game.
Yep.
This is a game. This is his. I mean, this has got to be for Bo. This has got to be like, oh God, I love these kind of games. You know.
Yeah. Well,
I don't want to see
Pryor
that
too.
Right. So I get where he's coming from, but with all due respect, your best linebacker's been J.D. Bertrand.
Sure. Yeah.
He's more physical. He's bigger, and he's faster than Drew White. So no.
And look, as much as I want to see Prince Collie, I just am not ready to take J.D. Bertrand off the field.
Well, I mean, he may need a breather in this game, and maybe that's when you see that alignment. But look, if you're going to put Prince Collie in the game, that's fine. But
this is a tough.
He's got to be run stunting. I mean, that's the thing is you don't play him, but when he's in, you're bringing him.
Yeah, don't make him think
slant
too much.
Slant the defensive ends inside and let him wrap around outside. Those kind of things. So, but when you're going to rest JD, because I think JD is going to need a breather at times in this game, then have, look, there's a couple things you can do, right? You can have, when JD needs a breather, maybe that's when you take him out and you go to a 3-3 look, and Isaiah Foskey's there, or Jordan Pateljo there. We've talked about if Jordan Pateljo, and I don't know if Jordan Pateljo is going to be ready to play defense this week, but we've talked about the possibility in the past. We've talked about the possibility of him and Isaiah Foskey playing together because he was a linebacker in high school. Maybe we see that. Maybe we see more Bo Bauer and Drew White together at times when JD needs that series off. There's a lot of options there. I'm curious to see which ones that they do.
Me too.
And I'm also curious to see how they use the rover, because you're not going to see a ton. You'll see some slots in this game. You will, but you're not going to see a ton of 11 personnel in first and second down. So if you're going to go with the rover, I'm curious to see how hard they play him. I'm crashing him off I'm bringing him from I'm shooting him in B gaps.
He's my wild card.
Yes.
That's how I would play him. And he's
both of them.
They can both do it. But somebody earlier said something about this is Isaiah Pryor's game. Yeah. I mean, this is the kind of game that he can excel in.
Him and Kaiser both, I think.
Exactly. I feel like the rover could be a big part of this game. He could be the wild card wherever you put him, send him. Make them find the rover and be worried about where the rover's coming from. Right.
And say, hey, look, we're going to try to beat you with the play action pass to negate your rover. That's fine.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to throw the ball in early downs. You know what I mean? So when we've got this kid that wears number 14 back there that we're okay with. That's another one I'm curious about is how do they use Kyle Hamilton?
Sure.
Last week it was to get him near the line of scrimmage. I don't know if I would do that as much in this game. I would almost kind of see him doing some of that, but I also kind of feel like maybe you might want him playing off where I'm keying the play action game, because I think Kyle Hamilton can completely erase your play action game if he's playing disciplined.
Sure.
I also think he can completely take your tight ends out of the game. in my opinion. So I know there's the temptation to get Kyle near the ball. I get it. But I feel like this might be one of those games where if Kyle has only 4 tackles, but 2 or 3 pass breakups, and he's forcing Graham Mertz to be afraid to throw. So there's times where Kyle Hamilton can impact a play, and it's a quarterback throwaway. Sure. And we don't see that Kyle Hamilton took it away on TV, but when you break down the film, you're like, yeah, he wanted no part of throwing that post route with Kyle Hamilton lingering back in the middle of the field.
Right.
So those are the things that I look at schematically, that this is one of those games where Marcus Freeman has a lot of toys.
Exactly.
And how he uses those toys is going to determine how successful they can be in this game. So I'm curious to see what he puts together and how exactly they use it. But I just feel like this is a game where it might seem different than what you would think, but this might be a game where just putting Kyle Hamilton in the middle of that field and saying, hey, Graham, I dare you to throw the ball downfield. Because if he's unwilling to do that because of Kyle Hamilton, that plays right into Notre Dame's hands. But that impacts the run game because now you're inserting Isaiah Pryor, Howard Griffith, Houston Griffith a little bit more. Maybe you're bringing your corner fires a little bit more at times. Things like that. So it's going to be fun to watch how they prepare, because normally you have to scheme for the pass game, Vince. This is one of those games where you're going to be scheming all day to stop the run, and it's old school football. It's old school football, and I'm looking forward to it.
So where's your advantage in the run game?
I mean, statistically, you have to give it to Wisconsin right now, right? Sure. I mean, the fact is that Notre Dame has had some issues giving up the big plays. So if we're just talking on paper, I think Wisconsin holds the edge. I have a feeling, however, again, there's statistics and analysis, and the statistics and the analysis of this game says that right now Wisconsin has the edge, right? I don't think you can argue against that. However, just the way Notre Dame is trending defensively, the last 2 games, the run defense has been pretty good with the exception of 2 plays, 1 in each game. They gave up a 67-yard run in the fourth quarter against Toledo. Right. They gave up a 30-something yard run was it also the fourth quarter? No, that was the third quarter against Purdue, because they were going this way, and in the fourth quarter they were going that way. So yes, third quarter, they gave up a 31-yard run in the third quarter. You take those 2 plays away, and Notre Dame held both of the last 2 opponents under 100 yards. So we're still the stats are still skewed by the bad first game.
Sure,
run defense has been pretty good in the last 2 games, but Toledo and Purdue are not Wisconsin.
No.
They are, especially Purdue. They're not a team that likes to run the football that much. So statistically, Wisconsin gets the edge. I just have a feeling that Notre Dame is going to be a little bit more ornery against the run than maybe some people think that they're going to be based on the numbers. So advantage Wisconsin based on statistical analysis, but at the end of the game, if that advantage is flipped, I won't be surprised. What do you say, Vince?
Yeah, I can't go with Notre Dame here. Again, you make a very good point as to what Notre Dame has done in the run game the past 2 games. That's great, but from what I saw from Wisconsin, I've got to give them the edge until I see it happen. Now, I have faith that Notre Dame is going to do some scheme and use their speed and all of that. I really do. And at the end of the day, it's not going to surprise me if Notre Dame has a good day against this Wisconsin run game. But going into the game, I've got to give the edge to Wisconsin.
Right.
Absolutely.
Because this is partly a statistical analysis, right?
Correct.
And it has to factor in.